I will introduce Miss MeiMei Fox. So she, yeah, she actually just got off the TED stage last week. So congrats, MeiMei, for officially becoming a TED speaker. And I want to share that with all of you because we are just so lucky to have her speaking in this really intimate setting and be able to ask her questions. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And in terms of MeiMei's background, so she is a 2 times New York bestselling author and a Forbes contributor with 25 years of experience in publishing. And then last year, she founded her company, Bestselling Book, and she helps those who want to become an author and publish their own nonfiction book or memoir. And then she also has her master's in counseling psychology and has worked as a life coach since 2009. So
Yeah.
a wealth of wisdom here. And with that, MeiMei, can you share a little bit about your personal journey into the world of writing? I'm curious how that intersects with your passion for mental health.
Yeah. So my start as a writer was kind of, I say that the universe chose me rather than I chose it because I graduated from Stanford. I went and worked at McKinsey, which is like a big, fancy management consulting company. I was there for about 3 months when I realized this is not a fit. But I stuck out my 2-year program and then I left. And that was the first moment when everybody in my life thought I was insane because if you go back and get an MBA, they'll pay for it if you come back and work there again. But I just couldn't do it because it didn't have purpose for me. It wasn't purpose-driven work. And I realized at that point, I was 24 years old. And I was like, I have to do work that is purpose-driven, that has meaning. That's it. I can't do this anymore. So that's how I ended up talking to a friend who wanted to write a book. He was a doctor, and his book was going to be called Sexual Fitness, which sounds kind of racy, but it really wasn't. It was like a health and wellness book where the outcome was better sex life, but also just about eating well and exercising diet. So that like set me on this whole trajectory of health and wellness. And from that, I got a book deal. I got an agent. I started working as a ghostwriter. I was kind of like going along on that path for a little less than 10 years, about 8 years. Also started blogging for Huffington Post, writing articles, and then I got divorced. So this is where everything went completely off the rails for the first time in my life. I got divorced. I was only 32. I didn't know anybody else who was divorced. I felt like a complete failure. At the same time, there was a complete scandal in my family of origin where my dad was on the headlines of the local newspaper. And I really felt the whole world had just crumbled around me. So that was my own first encounter with mental health issues. I've always been like a more high anxiety person. I've always been an insomniac my entire life. Like even when I was a kid, if there was a big day coming up, I'd have trouble sleeping. So it was this confluence of events that really sent me into the world of mental health and healing. And it's the best thing that ever happened to me. Like, what can I say? I'll cut to the chase. It was the best thing that ever happened to me because I spent the next 5, 6 years reading all the spiritual books, going to therapy, learning to meditate, doing a Vipassana meditation retreat 3 times, 10 days, silent retreat, and writing. And this is where we come along to writing really like for myself rather than for other people, writing about my own story. And I ended up going back to school to get a degree in counseling psychology. And I wrote my master's thesis on writing as a way of healing.
Mm.
So I did exploration into there's actual neuroscience research backing this up, and we can get into all of that. But that's basically the Cliff Notes version.
I love that, MeiMei. Thank you so much for sharing. And I'm curious, because we have some people in the room who are aspirational writers. What advice would you give someone who is interested in writing and using it as a tool for their mental health, but they're new at it and they don't know where to start?
Yeah. So this is my advice. Two things. Number one is do not judge what you write. Just, I call it vomiting words onto the page. And Anne Lamott, who's one of my favorite writers, she wrote this book, Bird by Bird, which is a beautiful book about writing. If you are an aspiring author, you should read that book, Bird by Bird. She talks about like the first draft is just get it all out, like just get no judgment, no editing. Don't worry about organization. Don't worry about what you're saying making sense. Just flow, free writing flow. That is the biggest gift to yourself, also from a healing perspective. Like just let it come out and let it flow. If you ever decide to publish it or do something with it, whether that's, putting it up on Substack or launching a blog or publishing a book or writing a screenplay, whatever, you can edit later. But the first draft has to be like just a free flow exercise in getting the words out on the page. And then the other thing I would say, if you really are serious about becoming a published author or building a following, is consistency. So that is James Clear, Atomic Habits, who I love and totally subscribe to. 5 minutes a day, commit to it. Commit to your 5 minutes a day and try not to let yourself get off the hook for that. Often that 5 minutes will turn into more, but at least that way, in 5 minutes a day, you could write a book in a year or two, honestly, in 5 minutes a day. So that's it.
I love that. Thank you, MeiMei. And I'm curious too, because ShareWell is all about supporting each other through mental health challenges. And so a lot of the writing that I personally do does involve sensitive, emotionally challenging topics. And so I'm curious, I know you kind of just said, just let it out. But do you have, is that kind of the method still for this too? Just let it out. And, even if we have a blog or how do you kind of navigate when you're talking about mental health or emotionally challenging topics?
I mean, I think anyone, if you know that you are going to be diving into real trauma, then it's good to have a support system of some kind. I wouldn't leave yourself dangling alone in the wind with your writing day after day, week after week, month after month. If you're going to be going into trauma, I would really advise having at least a best friend or a partner or a therapist or someone to be there, because it brings up really intense emotions. The good thing is that I was alluding earlier to the neuroscience research actually shows when they hook people up to fMRI machines, when you write about your trauma, you help heal it. I mean, that is really profound. It does help heal. And then the other thing is, while I am a big fan of putting everything out there, like writing everything and saying everything, you don't necessarily want to share everything with the world. And so there are people who do that. There are bloggers who like really, they just go all out. And that also requires a certain level of mental fortitude, because you're always at risk of, some trolls coming after you. And so I advise people in my writing courses to get it all out there for themselves, or maybe for their, immediate family or best friends or people they know they want to share that with. But when you are thinking about putting it out into the world, if you have a blog or a Substack, do think about like, can I handle this if I get attacked for this?
Mm.
I do recommend having a little moment, and you need to be vulnerable in your writing. It's critical, but also there are certain things you may choose not to reveal. And even people like Glennon Doyle and Elizabeth Gilbert, who are famous for writing really vulnerable stuff, I promise you, they're not telling every single little secret.
Yeah, yeah, I imagine. Know your limits and boundaries. I love that, MeiMei. And so let's get a little more personal. You mentioned earlier that you used writing as a tool when going through your divorce. Um, I'd love to know about your writing process at that time. I don't know if you published anything around that, but how was it a tool for your mental health then?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I've always been a fan of journaling, so it wasn't that big a leap. But given that I was going through the master's degree program at the same time, I thought, oh, this would be a great master's thesis. And then I'll actually write my memoir as part of my master's thesis and kill two birds with one stone. So that worked out well. But my process was that I moved from like the journal to actually trying to write a book. And I wrote like a short memoir, where I took time every day. That was really my commitment, was to writing every day. And then I did end up coming in on a structure, which I call it 10 days of silence, because it was about my first Vipassana meditation retreat. And so each chapter of the book is one day at the retreat and one spiritual lesson.
Mm.
So I kind of found a structure for it, but really it was like the consistency and the committing to writing every day. And what I found was I could just feel the difference in my brain from where I had started, where I felt like a failure and I felt ashamed, to the other side where it was, it's the hero's journey, right? Like Luke Skywalker and Barbie. Barbie's my latest favorite hero's journey story, where you go off and you confront things in yourself, but the outcome is personal transformation and growth. And so being able to see my story as one of personal transformation was really empowering and really healing for me. And I did end up publishing it. It felt a little too personal, but I did share it with my parents and my brother and my sister-in-law, which was really scary, and my best friends. And it was amazing. It was like also a profoundly healing experience to share
Mm.
with them, because they really received it with open hearts and were like, wow, we didn't know all this stuff. And it was a really beautiful bonding, connecting experience for us.
Mm. I love that. Yeah. And then MeiMei, for my next question, so you shared a little bit about the benefits of writing and the neuroscience behind it. Are there any common misconceptions that people have? You're a coach as well when they come to you and you're trying to get them to write. Yeah, what misconceptions or things do you run into with
Yeah.
verse writers?
Number one, I mean, almost every single person I ever write with has imposter syndrome, which I'm sure you've heard of, which is the first thing they say is like, who am I to write a book? Or this feels selfish, or it feels narcissistic. And I just like to have to do a complete reframe on that, because I honestly, sincerely, from the bottom of my heart, believe that every single person on the planet has a book in them. And that is the story of your life, or you have a story to share, whether it's a book or a blog or a screenplay or whatever. You have a story to share. And even if you're saying things that you think like, oh, this has been said a million times, like mine, like it's a divorce, like big deal. I mean, like half the world has been through that. But you know what? You have a particular unique perspective. You have your own journey, your own lessons, your own challenges. And I guarantee you that there will be some other people who will hear that message from you that they could not hear from someone else, or they did not hear from someone else. Like, I think often when you pick up a book, it's like, this isn't the first time you've heard this, but what is something about the way that author says it or their particular experience. And so I just encourage people, like, don't have imposter syndrome. You have a story, you have a voice, your story is worth sharing. What if you knew that you saved 2 lives with your book? 2. Would that be a success? Would that be worth it? So in addition to whatever the work is you're doing on yourself, which is profoundly healing, you are also helping heal the world. And I truly believe that.
Mm.
So that is the number one misconception. The number two is that, oh, I'm not a good writer, right? Like, just, I can't write. Okay. And this is what I love to tell people. Okay. Now, especially with transcription software with AI, like there's a free app called Otter. You could go download Otter AI right now, put it on your phone for free. Just talk. Just don't get hung up on writing, or this idea that like writing has to be fancy, or you have to be well educated, or you can just speak into your phone. You can speak when you're driving. You can speak when you're cooking, and then it'll transcribe that. And that becomes like the meat of what are you writing about right there. And I think even Google Drive has transcription now built into it. I mean, it's everywhere now. So yeah.
That's incredible. Yeah, thank you for that, MeiMei. I saw people asking, it's Otter,
Yeah, it's
Otter. Yeah, okay,
correct. Yeah,
wonderful.
yeah.
And I really love what you said about someone is just waiting to hear your voice and your words and the way you say it. Or even to add to that, maybe it's that right time for them. We see in ShareWell support groups, I'll talk from my experience, the ones I attend, sometimes I'll hear some wisdom that's shared that I know it, I've heard it before, but I needed it said right then as a reminder. And it jump starts wherever I am in my healing journey because it was the right time, it was the right place. And so I feel like writing that's the same sentiment that you shared. That's really beautiful.
I'm so glad you brought up the timing too. Yes.
Yeah.
Timing. Yeah. You could, something you could have heard for 20 years, but it's that moment, that crisis you're going through, that person who connects with you in just that special way.
I love that. And for the writers out here, I'm not even going to say aspiring writers because we are all writers. So let's all just embody this. But for those who are really trying to get serious about their writing and putting their message out to the world, MeiMei, can you tell us about best-selling book and what you do to help
Oh,
writers?
sure. I'd love to. So my company, Your Best-Selling Book, has a 6-week online course with a video on demand portion where I have recorded 6 hours of videos that are kind of masterclass style at everything I've learned in 25 years to take you from conception to completion and promotion of your book. Because a lot of people don't realize if you really want to put a book out, half the work is promoting it. It's a lot of work to promote it. And then we do live weekly workshops, which are my favorite. I love it. I love it so much. I'm in them all personally, no more than 10 people. And that's our community, which is like what you have at ShareWell, the community of 10 people who are sharing their writing every week, sharing their stories. It's so personal. We are crying. We all come out of that 6 weeks like each other's best friends and biggest cheerleaders. And writing a book can be lonely. So it's really nice to have a community to support you and keep cheerleading you. Like we're still cheerleading people who did the cohort last fall, like, you guys can do this. You can do it. Keep going. And we love you and your story is worth telling and we want to hear it. So it's a very positive, encouraging, and loving community. It's not about critique. It's about cheerleading.
I love it. I want in MeiMei. I'll,
Ah,
I'll take a look after this for sure. And what I'm seeing as a common thread, even with your best-selling book, is the coaching that comes along with it. And I know you've been a life coach since 2009. And so I would love to know, as a life coach, what is one piece of wisdom that you commonly give clients that could help our audience?
oh my gosh. I mean, you, you know, RuPaul says it best. I love RuPaul. He says, how the hell are you going to love somebody else if you don't love yourself first? And it's like, it's been said a million ways by a million different people. And it can sound cheesy. And again, it can sound like people can kind of bristle at the idea of like, you have to love yourself because it can sound narcissistic. But when I was able to ground myself in self-love, by the time I was like in my late 30s, after I'd done all this work on myself, it was so transformative. It is so liberating because you just realize like it's all good. Like it's all good if you can love yourself and people come and go, relationships come and go, friendships come and go, but if you can love yourself through it all, you just have your 2 feet on the ground and you are that much open to loving other people. It's really the case. And then people resonate to that. They resonate to that energy being put out in the world.
I love that, MeiMei. Thank you so much. And I'm also curious about how you maintain balance. So you are an entrepreneur who runs her own company. You are a coach. You also are a writer for Forbes. You
Yeah.
have two beautiful children. We constantly hear on ShareWell, it's a struggle to balance and anxiety creeps in. And so, do you have any tips on how you manage your life?
I don't believe in balance. How's that for a tip? I'm like, forget balance. You can spend your whole life trying to get balance. And if you get balance, you get it for like a heartbeat and then it goes away again. So instead of beating yourself up about balance, like what I try to do is just, it's my 5 minutes a day. I'm telling you, I'm obsessed with like the 5 minutes a day. So my days are going to be crazy. I'm going to be running around, running ragged. I love, I'm going to have 5 minutes to meditate, 5 minutes to write on my own damn stuff, not somebody else's, and maybe 5 minutes to like minimum. I mean, I love to exercise and move my body, but like if it's not going to be a lot, it's going to at least be. So that's kind of what I try to do. Like I think that I can drive myself crazy if I try to find balance. Balance is there and it's gone.
I love that. I've never heard someone phrase it quite like that, MeiMei. It was very poignant. Thank you.
I think of like
Um,
a seesaw, which is, like there's
yeah, well,
seesaw, right? You're like up and down. And you have this moment when you're with another person and you balance. But anyway,
yeah, I love that. Well, it really does take the pressure off because I feel like I've been striving to find balance for many, many years now, and it's like that unattainable thing. So, thank you. Yeah, and let's show some love in the chat. We're going to switch to the Q&A soon. If you're resonating with what Maymei's saying, throw some hearts, throw some affirmations. And then also any questions you have for Maymei, you can start putting those in.
yeah,
And oh,
I love that. I've seen some beautiful comments. I love someone pointed out the value of shadow work, which I love. That's what my master's thesis was all about. So, I mean, I went to a school that was Jungian, so it was all about shadow, and it kind of goes hand in hand with the balance thing. So I thought that that was relevant because that like Jungian psychology or depth psychology is this idea that we have all these archetypes living within us, and there's no such thing as perfect. It's like you yourself, you have like this beautiful light and you have this shadow. Everyone has light and shadow. And so again, instead of just trying to fix yourself or be perfect, you also see the value of the shadow side. Like there's actual goodness to come out of that. And if you're willing to confront it, if you're willing to face it, it can be your most powerful learning tool.
mm, I love that. Yeah, thank you for sharing. And do you have any like book recommendations? I saw someone ask what is shadow work. If anyone wants to dive into shadow work, is there any kind of author guide that you recommend?
Let's see. Well, I mean, Carl Jung is good, and there's actually a really beautiful book of poetry called The Rag and Bone Shop of the Heart, which I really love, which is like a collection of poems on the topic. Carolyn Miss is really great. I think someone mentioned her, Carolyn Miss. There's a lot of it out there once you dive into there's another podcast. Okay, okay, it's called Living Myth. Oh my God, I love this podcast so much. Michael Mead, he is a depth psychologist who puts everything about psychology and psychotherapy in the framework of mythology. It is so beautiful. It is so profound. I was just listening to one that he did on comparing us to caterpillars and these
Mm.
imaginal cells in caterpillars. Oh my God, so beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for writing that Living Myth podcast. Michael Mead, beautiful. There's a wealth of stuff. The second you like type that in, you go in that direction, Michael Mead, Carolyn Miss, Carl Jung, you will find like tremendous amount of stuff out there.
Also, MeiMei, I just want to thank you for sharing this time with us. I mean, I wrote down a whole list of resources, and I'll share them with all of our attendees after. I'm sure you want the books and the blogs and the podcasts, and this was really the most resource-rich session we've had, so thank you. And yeah, you just are really inspiring us all, MeiMei, to continue to use our voice in bigger ways. So a lot of praise for you. And we'll be following your journey. We'll share MeiMei's contact information and how you can be involved in your best-selling book after this.
Thank you so much, everyone. It was really lovely. I totally enjoyed it. Thank you, Amy.